Welcome back. You know, you never know what exciting and serendipitous thing is going to happen. I remember being an audience member at the play called Wicked. Fabulous play, by the way. And as it turns out, I happened to sit next to a couple, and we started chatting. And this couple turned out to be Bobby, the wife, and Peter VanDijk, the architect. Now, I don't remember how we got started chatting. It was probably about the play, but also because many years ago, when I worked at the Civic over on Mayfield, Van Dyke and Westlake, and I forget the name of the company, 14 years ago, but that's where I had heard his name. Anyway, a delightful unintended consequence after chatting with Peter and Bobby was that he agreed to come on the show. And I'm going to let him and James McGilbray, co-host with Gary and I, tell you what Peter's claim to fame is among his many. He didn't stop with just one. So James, would you welcome and introduce our guest to our audience?
Absolutely. And Peter VanDijk, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the Wake Up and Live show. Welcome.
So glad to be here, and it was such a pleasure meeting Sue.
Well,
it's the serendipity.
Yes.
Well, and Sue is an amazing person, as you know. And so are you. And I mean, the things that you've done here, once people realize what they are, they're going to say, oh, really? And that as well? Really? And so, in fact, recently, we'll start with some things that have happened recently, and then I'd like to go back to some of the things that you've done. But you've received a lot of awards, and including recently. Can you tell us a little bit about awards that you've received?
Architectural awards?
Yes.
Well, I've been retired now for more than 10 years, so they don't come around too much. So I'm resting on my laurels from before. But the most recent project that I did complete was an interesting one. It was the restoration of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And
the one downtown in Public Square?
In Public Square.
Okay.
And it's a building that very few people in Cleveland have actually been into. They think there's something in there you wouldn't want to go into, and they don't realize it's a wonderful museum of the Civil War. And it's just turned out great, because it's one that I can't think of one in the country that's even better. There's one in Indianapolis that's bigger, but this is really special.
Well, and I have had a chance to go in and see it, and I spent an extensive amount of time in it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful. In fact, it's surprising when you get inside what an amazing place. The colors and the vividness of the displays and such in it. Yeah. It's really very, very nice. Yeah. But one of the other things that you've been involved with is a lot of other structures that involve the arts.
Right. Yeah.
And what would you say, and I think I know the answer to this, but what would you say is your favorite project in terms of the arts? And when you say it, I think the Cleveland audience are going to say, wow, he did that? Tell us about the music.
Well, that would be Blossom Music Center.
Yes.
For sure, because that brings so many people. I love doing work that affects or helps the quality of life.
Isn't that beautiful?
And that includes hospitals and
Yes.
schools and so, but the entertainment, the performing arts is such a terrific thing. And Blossom is a big success in terms of, it's probably considered by the musicians that I meet all over the country the best summer pavilion.
Well, Cleveland, for its music, is known all over the world for our orchestra, our facilities.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was in the days when George Sell was the director.
Yes.
And he was pretty strict, saying, we have the best orchestra in the world, this has got to be the best facility
Yeah.
in
Well,
the world. So
now,
it's
how do you design in terms of taking into account not only the beauty, but obviously there are acoustic considerations?
The functions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that project is really a collaboration among architect, acoustician, is this person that's really comes from the world of physics. You know, that sound is really a big part of physics. And then, because it's such a big structure, you need to have a good structural engineer. You know, it's not just a easy little building putting beam on column and so. How do you span a building that big with no columns in the way to
Sight lines
obstruct
to
your sight
interfere.
lines,
Yeah.
that type of thing. And this happened to be a wonderful collaboration of the three of us. And so, plus, my hat off to the men and women that built it, because this was no ordinary building. There was nothing actually like that before, done on a very tight schedule, on a muddy sloping site with bulldozers sliding down the hill in winter time, and put that together in time for the opening of the season.
Well,
So,
pardon my ignorance, but because I've never seen the Hollywood Bowl itself,
Yeah.
but are they, is Blossom similar in concept to something like the Hollywood Bowl or the thing in what, Sydney, Australia,
The opera,
The Opera
Opera
House.
House, yeah.
no, it's similar to the Hollywood Bowl in the sense that it's a summer outdoor facility. Sydney Opera House is an enclosed building. But it would be similar to Tanglewood
Yes.
in the Berkshires, which is the summer home of the Boston Symphony.
Symphony, yeah.
And that preceded Blossom. And then there's also Ravinia in Chicago. And then there are a few smaller ones. And so, but it came about when the musicians union won a full year contract. And then the symphony owner said, well, we better keep these people busy. Let's have them work for us in the summer too. And that came about. But it's a very rewarding because it's architecture, it's acoustics, it's landscape, it's beauty, and it's a timelessness of it.
Oh, certainly.
I feel architecture to me should have a lasting quality. And I have a favorite way of describing what I'm after. That was a famous art historian, Giorgio Vasari. And he described a building in the Renaissance day one time that was so good. He says, non murato ma veramente nato. That means not built, but actually born.
Oh, my. The
That's
creative
the way
process,
I feel about
yeah.
something that is just so natural, the way it should be, not a cliche or a clever idea, that type of thing. See, that's what we were after in Blossom.
And when you and I met,
Yeah.
one of the things that I got so excited about, you, as it turns out, were instrumental in the redevelopment of the Playhouse Square Foundation, the Palace, the Allen, the Ohio, that complex down there. Such beauty, such grandeur that was restored to its original beauty and grandeur. Tell us about that project. How did you get involved? And you and I also spoke on, I think Ray Shepard was in the early days of working on
Ray
that
Shepardson,
project. Yeah.
No, but what's so wonderful about this is that a group of people in Cleveland banded together quickly before it was too late and did an amazing thing. Those theaters were ready to be torn down.
Yes.
The wrecking ball was standing by there. And it's Ray Shepardson he had come here from Seattle, and he noticed these theaters, and he was interested in theater, and he started talking about them. And in fact, I think he started talking to the junior league ladies about, is there some way I could have a theater or two and do something with this? And then I happened to be on the city's Fine Arts Advisory Committee, which also included Sherman Lee and Victor Schreckengoss and Joe McCullough and some really people that what they were
Victor,
talking
yeah,
about,
he
you know.
passed a couple of
Couple
years
years
ago.
ago,
I knew
yeah.
him.
Yeah, he was 101 years old.
I
But,
thought he made it to 102.
yeah.
Oh, well, whatever, it was a
Might have
lot.
been, yeah. But it was presented to us, the idea of building a parking lot on 14th and Euclid. And we thought, what parking lot? There's no empty space there. And little by little, the presenters told us they were going to tear down the theaters.
Sure.
And build a parking lot. And we just were appalled by this. So all we could do was reject the parking lot design. It was really cheap, a couple of 1-inch trees and, and stuff like that, you know. And so, in the meantime, Cleveland Foundation found out about it. The junior league gals got going, and with their pillow talk influence and their influential husbands, you know,
Yes.
and they formed a Playhouse Square Association, and that kept it going.
Had a few good lawyers too who
Oh,
were
yeah.
able to delay some actions
Oh,
for
sure.
a couple of weeks because, well, there's a curb here, and you really have to have a gradient and different
Oh, yeah.
little things that allow the
Oh,
momentum to build. It was an exciting time
Yeah.
that succeeded.
Yeah, it was good. The lawyers, John Lewis and Pudge Hankel, but also there was a young architect at the county that was sort of as custodian of the buildings that the county owns, and so. But he convinced the county commissioners, I forget who they all were, but one of them was George Vonovich,
Back then,
that they
yes.
should put some money into that to hold these buildings from being torn down, like buy them for the time being. And
Yes.
so did the Cleveland Foundation. And that, otherwise, we wouldn't have that. We'd certainly be the poorer for it.
Well, and it's now the second largest performing arts center in the entire United States. Only
Absolutely.
Lincoln Center in New
Lincoln
York
Center.
Yeah.
is larger. So.
Yeah.
And the thing is, those of us of a certain generation or era, before it became a derelict location, that was part of going downtown. You didn't live here yet.
Well, I was
But-
here in the 60s, but
Well, you have
briefly.
to go back a little bit further. Late 50s, let's see, we were in high school and college, but Euclid was the street
Mhm.
for the department stores, the Bonwood
Oh,
Tellers, the Sterling Lenders, the Halleys, the May Companies, the Higbees, all the small.
Millionaires Row, in fact.
Yeah, oh, yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
But then the theater, because let me tell this story quickly. One of the funniest things that I recall from that era is I was in college, and one afternoon after classes, I was downtown. Now, whether I was shopping or what, I don't know. And I saw that Psycho, it was a movie house by then. Psycho was playing, a matinee. So I said, oh, well, I guess, because, you know, the advertising. I went in and sat down, and the theater was virtually empty, you know, for a matinee at that time. And I swear that a pervert came in and sat down next to me in this virtually empty theater. Now, I had enough sense to wonder, you know, why did he do that? Why did he pick to sit next to me? But I led a very sheltered life. I didn't have enough sense to know. Point being, the pervert ended up getting up leaving because I got so involved in the movie and the shower scene that I was crawling all over him. I mean, I had climbed up this man and
Well,
he left.
Funny.
I didn't realize until just a couple of minutes ago what kind of time frame we were talking about here. And Peter, when you said that George Voinovich was one of the county commissioners, that was go back to what, the late 60s or early 70s, maybe
70s.
mid 70s.
Very,
I didn't
very
realize
early
what
70s, yeah.
what kind of time frame we were looking at, and you saved me from asking what would have been a really stupid question, because I thought we were looking at a time frame of roughly about 20 years ago that all of this happened.
Oh, no.
But
Yeah.
now that I know this, I'm grateful for the work that you did and that all the other people did to keep Playhouse Square alive, because I mentioned this to Peter before we started the taping. it's hard for me to believe it was 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years ago this summer. I had the opportunity to perform on stage at the Palace
that's right.
Theater.
Yes.
It was a benefit performance for Professional Flair, the Dancing Wheels, which I'm
Dancing
sure
Wheels,
everyone
yes.
is familiar with. We did an original play that was the benefit of the Dancing Wheels. We sold out at the Palace Theater. I had a part in this play. I had a non-speaking part. My part was called a derby. Because I wore a derby, I wore all black as we do for our staged readings. I also wore a black derby. And my job with my fellow derbies was to move the scenery on and off. But then we would stand next to the scenery, strike a pose next to the scenery until the scene was done, and then take it off and bring on the next
set.
set.
Yes.
The next set, exactly. And we performed with Ben Vereen, flew in from Los Angeles to perform with us. And there is a wall. In fact, the question that I was going to ask, thinking that this project was more contemporary than it was, there is a wall backstage in the Palace Theater. And we were told on this Saturday night, it was August 20th, 1994. I remember the very night that it happened. We were all told everybody who has ever performed at the Palace Theater has signed this wall. So you got to sign the wall. And the question I was going to ask was, since you redesigned the Palace Theater, which you didn't do, at least not since 1994, is the wall still there with my name on it? And I trust that the wall in the Palace Theater that everybody has signed, including me, is still there. But knowing now what I've just learned in the past few minutes, I'm grateful for what was done in the 60s and 70s, so I could have that chance to perform at the Palace Theater. As small a part as it was, I was on stage at the Palace Theater, and that is really something I'm very proud of.
Oh, but I have been on the stage of the Apollo Theater. Not singing, not dancing, but with working with the students. I was chaperoning. But we went up on the stage. So I have appeared on the Apollo Theater stage.
And I have appeared on neither one of them.
Peter, to get back to you, how in the world did either architecture pick you or you pick architecture as your soul or heart's expression about you becoming who you are?
It's a question that you get all the time. How'd you become an architect? But I guess it was, I grew up in South America, in Maracaibo, Venezuela. My dad was with the Shell Oil Company as an engineer. We were Dutch people.
Okay.
And
Shell is a Dutch
from Shell,
company,
yeah.
yes.
And you couldn't buy anything there. And that it was kind of out in the boondocks, you know, by the oil fields. It was mostly Dutch people. We had our own school. And so what I'm getting at is we ended up just making everything. You know, we made fabulous kites and slingshots and tree houses and airplane models and that type of thing. And most of us just did a lot of drawing also, just to keep busy with way before TV or anything.
Sure.
In fact, there was hardly any radio there. But then when I came to the States as a 15-year-old, which was going to be very temporary, the war was still going on, and the minute the war was over, we were supposed to be moved to Holland, and we'd ended up our life there. And that lagged a bit. And then when it was time to go, my mom said to Dad, hey, you know, it's going to be tough on these three boys now to go back to Dutch schools and everything. And so Shell said, well, we're a big international company. We'll stay in the States. So I went to Cornell as a 16-year-old studying engineering because the jet planes were just coming, the idea, they weren't built yet. We didn't have any. But the whole idea of it, and that fascinated me. And when I heard that GE and Westinghouse would be making those jet engines, I thought maybe I should be an electrical engineer. So I went to Cornell, and my sophomore year, before my sophomore year, I just turned 18. I said, you know, I don't think I want to do that. My roommate was an architect. I said, that sounds very interesting. And because I was always drawing and making anyway, went in. into that. And life is these forks in the road. I call them fortuitous intersections that you might
I
have.
like that.
And you know, how do you end up in that?
Well, you ended up in Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah.
And what was the reason that you came to Cleveland in the first place?
Cleveland got, in the late 1950s, a federal building to build. Big project in those days, $32 million it was. And so they gave it to 3 Cleveland firms because it was such a big job. Also politically, they couldn't give it to one of them.
Gotcha.
Nowadays, probably.
Yes, the world has changed, yeah.
But so the 3 got together and said, okay, and GSA, the government, General Service Administration, said, you guys form a joint venture, get a separate office, and then staff this event and go. And so one of the partners said, well, we'll design it, of course, and you guys will do the drawings and you'll do the engineering. And the other partner said, baloney. We'll design it, use different words, and you'll do this and you do that. And then the other guy said, no way. And so they could not agree. So they thought about getting a architect in, as we call them today, some design consultant, like a Frank Gehry, or you know, some of those famous names. Frank Gehry wasn't around in those days. He was my age.
Okay.
And I was 36 years old. But anyway, then the next step was, let's find somebody that's worked for one of these star architects. See, and I'd been working for Eero Saarinen, who had hired me. And he was famous for the St. Louis Arch or the Dulles Airport and lots of fabulous buildings and so. And somebody knew somebody that knew me there, and that's how I came to
One of those
Cleveland.
serendipities.
It was. And it just,
Well, now you mentioned a couple of very prominent artists. You mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright, you mentioned Frank Gehry. And the city of Cleveland is blessed to have architecture from a number of great artists, everyone from Marcel Breuer
yeah.
to you know, Gehry and I.M. Pei
Sure.
and others. Among today's starchitects, as it were, who are some of your favorites?
Of today's, I would say right now probably Renzo Piano. That sounds a little conservative, but I feel that architecture is a service profession, just like medicine, law, anything, you know. You're hired to solve a problem. In the case of architecture, you're dealing with lots of money from other people, somebody else. You know, our projects are usually millions of dollars. Your first rule has to be to very responsibly solve the problem. That means, you know, make sure that it's designed in a way that it makes sense functionally, that it's energy efficient, that it has all these kind of things. But then beyond that, you need to do something that makes it architecture. That just sort of lifts people's spirits, you know, make even for people that don't work there or own it or anything, that people just walk by. I love that building. I just, every time, you know, it's a wonderful place to work in or to live in, and that type of thing, you see.
Causes people
And,
to have some kind of visceral reaction to it.
Yeah. But as a result, today I find that a lot of architecture is a little egocentric. Like, look what I can do.
Okay.
You know, that type of thing. Now, I'm not saying everybody's bad, that you can't do both, etc. But I love Renzo Piano's work. He's done a lot of museums, and so they're functionally beautiful buildings, but also buildings that are real architecture, that have a lasting quality. You know, that's
and speaking of museums, of course, the Museum of Art just underwent a very large expansion with Raphael Vignoli, who has done some wonderful work.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're affiliated with the Cleveland Institute of Arts. is that correct?
Yeah, right, yeah,
Okay.
the art school, right.
And they're getting ready to do an expansion on the old McCullough building.
Under construction now. Yeah.
I would like for you to speak to the things that you would like the community to know about what's going on now architecturally in the city, that people should be aware of, like the expansion of the museum. What things are important to you now with regard to what's going on in Cleveland? Maybe tell us a little bit about the Art Institute as well.
Sure. Well, let's start about the Art Institute. The Art Institute was founded back in the 1870s or 80s or so, and it's a great school. And they've had 2 campuses for many years now. They used to only have one, but then they had that Ford factory, which is the ideal building for an art school. Room to swing a cat and make a mess, and it's not a museum. It's what artists working with welding torches and everything like that. See, and now we're consolidating everything by adding to it and selling the old property to Case and the museum. But the interesting buildings that are going on now, you should look at the student union at Case. It's under. I have to go there today. I'm not involved in it except that I have a meeting with some sculptors and so. But it's a very interesting building. I don't know even how to describe it. It almost looks like a starfish or so. It has
A
all
long
these
way
different
away
legs.
from Swing when I used to go
Yeah,
there. A long
yeah,
way
it is.
away.
And then, of course, the Institute of Arts edition, the MoCA, the whole uptown part of University Circle, I think is just wonderful.
Isn't it
Because
amazing?
in the years that I've lived here, I've thought, Case Western University is a great place, but there's no student life there. All the life is out in Coventry. That's where the street life is. And so now, all of a sudden, because there's so much housing being provided in the University Circle area, people live there, and of all ages. And so,
Very cosmopolitan. Yeah.
yeah.
We got to wrap up.
I
So
know.
Well, just one
Yeah.
other question. Part of, I am not originally from Cleveland, although I was here in the 60s. I am madly head over heels in love with this city. In fact, there are only a couple of things you can do to make me really angry. One is talk bad about my parents. They're saints. That's been established by God. But number 2, talk bad about this city without having come here and experienced what this city is about. And one of the things that's getting ready to happen now is a redevelopment, for example, of the flats. And there's been the discussions and the planning for the lakefront. So in terms of what the potential is for development in this city, can you speak to the development of the flats and the use of the lakefront and what you would like to see in those types of large projects?
Good, because this is probably the 2nd or 3rd round in the flats. It's not long ago that was it, and then it died. It's nice to see it coming back. What worries me a little bit is that Cleveland, they keep changing everywhere. We just fixed up Euclid Avenue, and now we're emptying out all those buildings in the downtown core, you see. And it's all down in the left field, way down there by the river. See? And it's, I wish we were strengthening our main 9th and Euclid area more.
excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah.
I keep getting the signal that the tape is running out. So we're going to have you back when you have time, because we could use the whole hour chatting with you. So what I need to do quickly is to thank you, I don't know, from the bottom of my heart. It may sound trite, but because you're an arts person, and I was so fascinated with the work you've done with the theaters, among your many, 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 many other accomplishments. Thank you. Don't go away.
Pleasure. I'll be back.
Keep doing things, for Cleveland.
Sure.
And we'll talk more next time. We'll schedule you at a convenient time. And we want to thank James and Gary and our other guests, Janice Williams and Yvette Butler from Rainey Institute, for joining us today. And I'm Sue Johnson, and I am producer, director of the Wake Up and Live with the Arts show. And so we want to end and just say, be sure to wake up and live with
the arts every day.
Okay, see you next time.